Michael,
Lino!
another Wednesday,
Another Wednesday. Though, in fairness, we kind of skipped a Wednesday because
right?
you were away. Things were
Yep.
crazy. It was spring break at St. Mike's, but we're back in the saddle.
Yeah.
And loving life.
Uh,
Living life to the fullest.
Living life to the fullest. Yes. As Michael was saying, last week, I was in Hartford, Connecticut with a group of students from St. Michael's College in a service trip, which was great.
Yeah. Service trips are great. Take a lot out of you. Like
Yeah,
you
it was sort of work.
probably could have had
but,
a little nap time after.
In previous occasions when either of us was not available for the week, we recorded ahead of time. But this last week was just crazy. So, anyways, we skip a week. That's fine. We continue.
We persevere. We don't go backwards. We proceed.
Exactly.
That's what life is all about.
So, today, if you read our thingy,
our
description of today's show,
the technical term,
a thingy, is that we're talking about Saint Joseph.
Saint Joseph.
Last Monday, the 19th, was the feast of Saint Joseph.
Solemnity of Saint Joseph.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Saint Joseph further, but one of the things that I like about the Solemnity of Saint Joseph, and I think, if I'm not wrong, is the only day during Lent, or usually during Lent, that the Universal Church gets to wear white.
I can think of only one exception, and it wasn't the case this year. Depending on when Easter is, if it's later, the Feast of the Annunciation, March 25th.
Right. Exactly.
Can also be that way, but just the way that it works,
but
we're putting that off until after Easter.
But usually, I've never seen a year with the Feast of Saint Joseph goes off or out of the season of Lent.
I think you're right. It's always
there.
That day. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So in any case, so we're going to talk about Saint Joseph.
Saint
Traditionally, Joseph, the father of, or at least the foster father of Jesus, the adopted father of Jesus, betrothed to Mary, and he had the task to raise Jesus with the help of Mary. And before the show started, one of the things and we can go that deeper later, but one of the things that Michael and I were talking is that what we know about Joseph, it comes either mostly from tradition, because the biblical
description
of Joseph, stories
portrayal.
of Joseph, it's not there. There's not much information we can gather from the Bible.
He doesn't get any lines, as it were. There's no spoken quotes of Joseph. It's always speaking kind of passively about what he did or what he's all about. So I like the analogy that you used. He's a person that's sometimes maybe behind the scenes. Right. Sometimes that doesn't mean that he's not important or not doing anything. Sometimes those are the most important things.
They're there for the effects of their work or what they're doing.
Exactly.
But they're not very loud
visible
or
in that way. And sometimes that's more powerful than being directly present, because choose my words very carefully here. I've encountered people that they say a lot, but they actually say very little. Right?
Yes.
Maybe that's you and me on this show sometimes. I don't know. But there's sometimes people that are like that.
Yeah. No, but so to break this a little bit more, if you go to the Gospels, the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of John, they don't have the narrative of the childhood of Jesus.
Right.
And you only hear of Joseph in those Gospels
kind of after the fact, and only to refer to Jesus like the father of Jesus, this is the son of Joseph the carpenter. Right.
So they're referring they're referring to Jesus as the son of. But you don't hear or see or
who was the father.
No,
you don't get that in those
Joseph.
two.
Yeah, which is really interesting. And also they use the person of Joseph to pinpoint the location of Jesus in Nazareth. So, but that's it. They don't talk specifically or particularly about Joseph.
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, as you indicate, based on biblical evidence, there's not much that we can know. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me on this. I'm fairly confident about this, but I think it's John's gospel, which is the only one that describes Joseph as a carpenter, and it's after the fact, because is this not the carpenter's son? So that's the only way that we have this association of Joseph as a carpenter. And this is getting pretty technical, but the Greek word, the Gospels are written in Greek. The Greek word that's used is teknon, which sometimes can have maybe more of a deep meaning than just carpenter, because we think of carpenter as somebody that works with wood specifically. So teknon, we get in modern language words like technical, technology. So it's somebody that was able to work with tools and build things of any sort. But tradition kind of has translated that and passed it down to us as carpenter.
And so those the two Gospel, Mark and John, they don't, as I said, they don't talk directly of Joseph. Right. They mention Joseph as a way of describing who Jesus is.
Right.
So that's the only thing. Then the other two Gospels are kind of interesting in the way they talk about Joseph. For example, in the Gospel of Matthew is interesting because he starts his Gospel with a very lengthy genealogy.
Family tree of Jesus, going back to Abraham. So he
starts with Adam and Eve, all the way down to Abraham, and then to Moses and
David. You know, all the greatest hits.
Yeah, and then finally goes to Joseph, and Joseph was the father of Jesus. So Joseph is the descendant of David.
Right.
And that's how Jesus comes to become the heir of the throne of David, if you will.
And why that matters, just to fill in some of the detail, is there's a moment in the Old Testament where this great King David, this great king of Israel, is told by a prophet that God is saying that you will remain on the throne forever. Your family will rule forever. You know, the line of David will not be broken. And that, for some, became problematic because that royal family, that did get broken in the sense that they got kicked off the throne. The Jews were exiled. They came back. The family of David kind of had fallen on hard times, which is why by the time Joseph rolled around, it wasn't a kingly family anymore. He was just working with his hands as a carpenter. Right. But the prophecy said that from the family of David, that's where the Messiah will come from. And that's kind of where the importance of that genealogy is, and for placing Joseph within the family of David.
And interestingly enough, in the Gospel of Matthew, the Annunciation, if you will, the knowledge that Mary is going to be the mother of Jesus, the Son of God, comes through Joseph. So Matthew doesn't have the Annunciation as Luke.
Right.
What Matthew presents is that, so he presents us who Joseph is, right? He says he's in the line of David. And then because he's in the line of David and he was betrothed to Mary, and we hear this reading last Monday from the Gospel, Joseph finding out that when he found out that Mary was pregnant.
Right. Wait, hold on.
He said, like, hey, I
don't remember this.
Yeah, so he
being flippant about it, but
being a just man, he didn't want to expose Mary.
Yeah.
Because if he would have exposed Mary and said, this woman is pregnant and we haven't been married yet.
In that culture, that would be
that would have been the end of Mary. Mary would have been killed by stones or any other way, because that was considered a no-no. Because the way it worked in that time, so they get betrothed. It's kind of like an engagement.
Yep.
And they will still live each in his home, her home, and then they get to know each other, and then they get married. So he was like they were like engaged when Mary was pregnant, and then the angel of the Lord shows up
in a dream, said, "Hey, that whole pregnancy situation, don't worry about it. Like this is meant to be. Trust us." And
as you said, you had a really nice homily on Monday.
Oh, thank you.
From an angle that never thought about it, which was great. So and then Joseph is the one who gets announced that Herod is going to kill the infants, and it's the one who gets in a dream also again to leave to Egypt, and then he's the one who gets the message. So in a way, Matthew presents us the Annunciation and the birth of Jesus through kind of, if you will, the eyes of Joseph. And Mary is almost not there. I mean, we know she's there because she's the mother, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And then in the Gospel of Matthew, after that, Joseph doesn't appear anymore.
Right.
So we don't hear anything about Joseph.
We don't know what happened. And then in Luke's Gospel, the episode that's standing out into my mind is Mary and Joseph find Jesus in the temple, as a young child. I'm not thinking of any Joseph-specific moments that come elsewhere in that.
Well, it's
in that
kind
gospel.
of the same.
Similar, right?
That
similar
happened in the other two
story,
gospels.
right?
Luke presents Joseph as the husband of Mary,
exactly.
and they go down to Bethlehem, and Jesus gets born there.
City of
but
David.
we know Joseph is there, but that's it. We don't hear anything from Joseph or who Joseph is.
Right.
And then again, the image you have, like Jesus gets lost in the temple, and then we know Joseph was there, but that's it. Interestingly enough, there are other instances in the early life of Jesus, like for example, the wedding at Cana.
We see his mom present.
Mom is present, but we don't hear that Joseph is there.
Right. And this gave rise to, if I can jump into some tradition. So these are elements that are not found in the Bible, but have become part of church tradition.
Yep.
One of them was that Joseph was a fair bit older than Mary when they married. You know, we don't have a way to determine the truth of that, but that's a long-standing tradition. And so there was this thought that Joseph predeceased Mary. He died sometime while Jesus was still a young man before his active ministry. And I remember at my church in Burlington, I say my church, the church that I was baptized in and grew up in, my parish in Burlington, Vermont, St. Anthony's, there's a big stained glass window of an image that I've seen in other places too, which is Joseph is old and he's sick in bed, and you have Mary standing over him and Jesus standing over him, because it's kind of, this is the death moment of Joseph, and kind of symbolizing, you know, the health of having a good death in the Lord, as it were. That's kind of a Joseph motif that's in tradition.
Yeah, the other tradition, if you will, that I heard in my infancy too was that Joseph was
the Lino infancy narrative.
Yeah, that Joseph was a widower.
That's right. Yep. So he had been married.
Joseph had been married before.
Maybe even had some kids from that relationship.
And the idea that comes out is that when Jesus comes back to Nazareth, so he started his ministry, he's gone out, and when he comes back to Nazareth, he's rejected in Nazareth, and you see that in the Gospel of Mark. And one of the things that the people in Nazareth say, well, isn't this Jesus, the son of Mary, the brother and the sister of so and so?
Right.
So in a way to interpret or how to give some meaning to that word brothers and sisters was that Joseph was married before and he had kids, and then he went which again, this is not in the Bible, this is just stories and traditions that come down. We don't know if they're true, we don't know anything.
But they are long-standing traditions, so who knows? I mean, don't just dismiss them. But in a lot of Christian artwork and tales, you'll see some of those images reflected. But what can we gain from Joseph? What can we learn from about him?
So I think the first thing is like what we said at the beginning. Is the kind of Joseph, the kind of person that you don't hear about, but you know he's there.
Absolutely.
What I'm saying is that in the time of Joseph and in the time of Mary and Jesus, Mary and Jesus were in the lower side of society. So Mary being a woman, and then Jesus for being a child, at least in his early life. So the fact that they made it through is that they had a male figure in the family that provided for them, and that of course was the work of Joseph. Joseph, as again, we don't know for real that he was there, but the fact that Jesus made it and Mary made it, it's in fact a good idea that Joseph was there. Also, the fact there's also a tradition that says that Jesus was also a carpenter.
Had to be taught that by somebody.
Exactly. So somebody had to been teaching Jesus the art, the craft of carpentry. Oh,
see, we're simpatico. Which at that time, like if you had that sort of skill, I mean, that was good. That was good work that you could provide for your family that way. I'll mention this too, and this is fresh in my mind because this is kind of the angle I took when I was preaching about it. I see Joseph as a model of faith in a lot of ways, because he came into this, for lack of a better term, strange family situation where, you know, his bride-to-be was pregnant. He knew that the baby was not his. That's all that he knew initially. He had dreams, he had thoughts, and that kind of clarified it for him. But he still himself made a decision. I'm gonna stay with this. I'm gonna see this through. I love this woman. I'm gonna raise this child like it's my own. There's elements of faith there, and I think a model for good fatherhood. Being there for your family, providing for your family, sometimes through the difficult elements of it. That reason, Joseph is the patron saint of fathers. He's a patron saint of workers because of his carpentry. There's many countries that have him as their patron saint. I forgot to mention this at Mass, and someone corrected me. Saint Joseph is a patron of the Society of Saint Edmund, which I neglected to mention. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. But he's one of the three primary patrons of the Society of Saint Edmund. So he's got a lot of things under his control.
And Joseph also has another feast day, which is on May 1st.
Yep, Saint Joseph the worker.
So I think that is also the idea that Joseph as the provider of the family, the gaining the daily bread with the sweat of their brow. That idea of providing for the family,
absolutely,
being a productive part of the society, bringing your craft or mastering your craft in a way that gives people
there's a dignity to work.
So totally. So I think that those are the key elements of Saint Joseph.
Absolutely.
That I believe an important. Of course, were important for Mary and for Jesus at their time, but also for us as Catholics.
Absolutely.
And in the Catholic Church as a symbol and as a image of how things should be done, if you will.
And I think someone like Pope Francis agrees that Joseph has a primary place, because it was just within the last couple of years that Pope Francis decreed, he kind of personally said, hey, this is what we're going to do now, that Joseph's will be mentioned by name in each of the 4 main Eucharistic prayers that you use at Mass. It's a little confusing sometimes because he made that decree after a lot of the books have been published, so it's not always included there, but we're expected to kind of remind ourselves and know we mention St. Joseph by name whenever we celebrate Mass.
Yeah, because the thing was that before that, I don't remember which post was, and
that's okay.
Because we were not planning to talk about this, but anyway.
Going on a tangent.
So Saint Joseph was added to the Roman canon, Eucharistic prayer number 1, and then when Pope Francis came, he said, well, he should be added in every single Eucharistic prayer. So he was added. So now we pray for our Virgin Mary, and then Blessed Joseph, her spouse,
blessed apostles, glorious martyrs,
and on all the saints. So I think that's a good learning person for Saint Joseph, for his life, what he did, and we didn't hear about it, but we pretty much know that he's there.
Absolutely.
So I think that'll be wrapping it up for today.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
As I always say, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. If you liked it, thumbs up. If you don't like it, thumbs down. And if you have any questions or any particular topic that you would like us to talk about,
let us know.
Not talk about, but ramble about.
Sometimes we kind of
please let us know in your comments.
We're happy to talk about.
And this. we definitely read all your comments, and we are thankful for them. And we will see you next week.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lino.
I'm gonna mess this up as I always do.
I mean, it wouldn't be the Edmundite show without this.
All right, folks. I got it done. I'll see you. We'll see you next week.
Thank you all for watching.